The sirens echoed off the canyon walls long before the first red and blue lights cut through the darkness. U.S. Route 50 was nearly empty at that hour, a thin ribbon of asphalt stretching across the Colorado night. Then the radio call came in, sharp and urgent. Unit 12, respond. Possible vehicle fleeing federal property near Florence. No plates. Driver non-compliant. Deputy Marshal Aaron Vance pushed his accelerator to the floor. Ahead of him, a pair of taillights swerved violently between lanes, as if the driver couldn't decide whether to escape or crash. The vehicle shot past a faded road sign that most people never noticed, one that simply read, Florence Federal Correctional Complex. Next exit. The car veered off the highway without signaling, tires screaming as it dove down a service road that led nowhere civilians were supposed to be. Vance followed, heart pounding, every instinct telling him this wasn't just a reckless driver. The chase lasted less than 2 minutes. The suspect's car slammed into a concrete barrier near an unmarked security gate and spun sideways in a cloud of dust. Vance braked hard, stepped out with his weapon drawn, and shouted commands into the cold air. No response. The driver's door hung open. The seat was empty, but the engine was still running. Vance moved closer, each step slow and deliberate. The interior light flickered, illuminating the steering wheel, the cracked windshield, and something dark splattered across the dashboard. Blood. Not a smear. Not a drop. A violent, desperate spray. There were no footprints leading away from the vehicle. No trail into the brush. No sign of a struggle outside the car. It was as if the driver had vanished into thin air. And less than a mile away, behind layers of razor wire and reinforced concrete, stood the most secure prison in the United States. ADX Florence. By sunrise, the road was crawling with federal agents. Black SUVs lined the perimeter, their doors open, radios crackling. Crime scene tape flapped in the dry morning wind while technicians photographed every inch of the abandoned car. Inside the trunk, they found a canvas bag. Inside the bag, they found a Bureau of Prisons uniform, neatly folded, soaked in blood that hadn't yet dried. And tucked inside the breast pocket was an ID card. Officer Daniel Mercer, correctional officer, assigned to ADX Florence, reported missing 8 hours earlier. Special Agent Lena Kessler arrived just after 8 a.m., her boots crunching against gravel as she stepped under the yellow tape. She had the kind of calm presence that made chaos organize itself around her. Her eyes scanned the scene once, then again, slower. "Tell me he wasn't on duty last night," she said quietly. A marshal beside her shook his head. Off shift. Didn't show up for his next rotation. Wife reported him missing around midnight. Kessler stared at the prison complex in the distance. ADX Florence didn't loom. It didn't tower. It simply existed, low and heavy against the earth, as if it had grown there instead of being built. A structure designed not just to hold bodies, but to dismantle routines, to erase predictability, to make time meaningless. Nobody got close to that place by accident. Inside Mercer's abandoned car, investigators found no phone, no wallet, no personal effects. Only the uniform and the blood. Too much blood for a staged disappearance. Too little for a confirmed death, which left a single, unsettling possibility. Whatever happened to Daniel Mercer had happened somewhere else. And whoever drove that car to the prison gates wanted it found. By noon, Kessler was inside the administrative wing of ADX, escorted through a maze of reinforced doors that sealed shut behind her with hydraulic finality. Every corridor looked identical. Every corner camera watched without blinking. Warden Thomas Grady met her in a windowless conference room. He didn't bother with small talk. No breaches, no alarms, no unusual movement logged overnight, he said flatly. Kessler slid Mercer's ID across the table. Then explain why one of your officers' uniforms was found soaked in blood a mile from your gate. Grady didn't touch the card. His eyes lingered on it for half a second too long. Officer Mercer had no reason to be near that perimeter, he said. None. Maybe someone wanted it to look that way. Grady leaned back, folding his hands. Agent, ADX doesn't operate on routine. No predictable patrols. No fixed schedules. That's by design. You can't plan anything around this facility. Not even from the inside. Kessler held his gaze. Then someone improvised. A silence settled between them, thick and uneasy. Give me his last week, she said. Shifts, assignments, incidents, everything. Grady hesitated. That was the first real crack. Late that afternoon, buried in Mercer's duty logs, Kessler found an entry that didn't match anything else. 3 days before his disappearance, Mercer had been temporarily reassigned, not to a different block, not to a different wing, but to maintenance escort duty in sublevel C. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you think you can handle the truth, because this story doesn't just crawl under your skin, it locks the door behind it. They say the walls of Blackwood Penitentiary hold secrets, but I never imagined they'd be this dark. My name is Evelyn Reed, and I'm an investigator. My latest case started with a missing person report. A correctional officer named David Chun vanished from a place no one is supposed to be able to leave. Blackwood is a fortress, a state-of-the-art supermax prison. Getting in is hard, getting out is impossible. So how does a guard just disappear? The official story was that he walked out, but Chin's car was still in the parking lot, his apartment untouched, and his last paycheck uncashed. Something was wrong. I started my investigation at the prison. The warden, a man named Marcus Thorne, was cooperative, almost too cooperative. He gave me full access, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. He insisted Chun must have had personal problems, a reason to run. But Chin's colleagues told a different story. He was meticulous, a stickler for the rules. He wasn't the type to just leave. One officer, a rookie named Miller, pulled me aside. He was nervous, glancing over his shoulder. He told me Chun had been obsessed with the prison's original blueprints. He'd been spending his off hours in the records room, muttering about inconsistencies, about sections that didn't add up. The day he disappeared, Chun had told Miller he was going to check something out in the maintenance tunnels of Sublevel 3. Sublevel 3 was officially just for storage and utility access. But when I went down there, the air was cold, and there was a strange, low hum that wasn't on any of the schematics. Following the tunnels, I found a section of the wall that looked newer than the rest. There was no handle, no keypad, just smooth, cold concrete. But I noticed a faint scuff mark on the floor, right at the base. Pushing against it, a section of the wall slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into a place that wasn't supposed to exist. A sublevel 4. The air here was stale and smelled of antiseptic. It was a fully functional, high-tech wing, but completely empty. Monitors glowed in a control room, showing empty cells and corridors. It was a prison within a prison. As I explored, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered, and a distorted voice whispered a single phrase. They were building it to keep people in. Then the line went dead. My blood ran cold. I rushed back to the warden's office, my mind racing. I confronted Thorne, telling him about the secret sublevel. For the first time, his calm demeanor cracked. He denied everything, but his eyes darted towards a framed photo on his desk. It was an old black and white picture of the prison's groundbreaking ceremony. Looking closer, I saw a face in the crowd I recognized. It was a younger version of a notorious bioengineer, a man who had vanished decades ago after a scandal involving illegal human experimentation. He was standing next to the prison's original architect, and that's when it all clicked into place. The missing officer, the secret sublevel, the strange phone call. Blackwood Penitentiary wasn't built to contain criminals. The blueprints Chun was studying weren't for a prison. They were for a laboratory, a containment facility. And the warden wasn't just a warden, he was a gatekeeper. The most terrifying part? The empty cells in Sublevel 4. They weren't empty because no one was there. They were empty because the subjects had already been moved. The mystery of the missing guard had just blown open a conspiracy far bigger than I could have ever imagined. And now, I was standing in the middle of it. The question wasn't what happened to David Chin anymore. The question was, what was being kept here, and where is it now? Thanks for watching. If you're as intrigued as I am, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this investigation is far from over. The words were still visible even after the floodlights came on. It was built twice. They weren't carved deep into the concrete. They hadn't been painted or scratched with metal. They were written with a fingertip, dragged through a thin film of dust that had settled over the floor like gray snow. Whoever wrote them had done it recently. The edges were still sharp, undisturbed. Agent Lena Kessler stood at the bottom of the maintenance shaft, the beam of her flashlight steady despite the unease building in her chest. The air down there felt wrong. Not stale, not damp, just unused, as if the space itself had been forgotten. Behind her, two technical agents unpacked portable lights and began scanning the walls. The chamber was smaller than expected, A concrete room no bigger than a two-car garage. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling. A steel door on the far wall sat flush with the concrete, unmarked, unpainted, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. There was no handle, no hinges, only a narrow seam outlining its shape. Maintenance storage? Kessler called up the shaft to Warden Grady, who stood watching from above. That's the only designation on the plans, Grady replied. His voice echoed down, hollow and distant. Kessler swept the light across the floor again. No tools, no shelving, no dustless footprints except their own. And yet someone had been here. Recently. She crouched beside the message on the floor. There were faint smears around the letters, as if the writer had tried to steady themselves while kneeling. A drop of dried blood stained the concrete near the final word. Mercer's blood type matched. He was alive when he wrote this, one of the texts said quietly. Kessler nodded. And afraid. She rose and approached the steel door. Up close, it didn't look like a normal service access. The concrete around its edges was too smooth, too perfectly poured. Like the wall had been built around the door instead of the door installed into the wall. She ran her fingers along the seam. Cold, solid, hidden. Warden, she called, without turning. You said this level was just storage. That's correct. Then what's behind this door? A pause stretched overhead. I have no record of that access point. Kessler turned slowly, eyes narrowing. You retelling me there's a sealed steel door inside your prison that isn't on your records? Grady didn't answer immediately. When he did, the confidence in his voice had thinned. I'm telling you, ADX has undergone modifications over the years. Some areas are decommissioned. Decommissioned, she repeated. Or erased. The warden descended the ladder, boots striking each rung with controlled irritation. When he reached the bottom, he stood beside her, studying the door as if seeing it for the first time. This isn't standard bureau design, he admitted. Kessler's jaw tightened. Who built it? Grady didn't reply, which was answer enough. Within the hour, a structural engineer arrived with portable imaging equipment. Ground-penetrating radar units were rolled into the chamber. Sensors pressed against the wall beside the steel door began mapping the density of the concrete beyond it. Everyone waited in tense silence as the monitor flickered to life. At first, the image was simple. Solid mass, thick foundation, then shapes emerged. Lines, angles, empty space. Not just a room behind the wall. A corridor. The engineer zoomed out. The corridor extended farther than the scan range. This shouldn't exist, the engineer whispered. Kessler stared at the display, pulse quickening. Can you tell where it leads? The engineer shook his head. It's not on any grid. Not aligned with the facility's main axis. It's offset. Offset. Built separately. Built twice. Kessler looked at Grady. The warden's face had gone pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Whoever designed this, she said slowly, designed two prisons. One everyone sees, and one nobody knows about. Grady swallowed hard. That's impossible. Then explain the corridor. He couldn't, because there was nothing left to explain, only something left to uncover. Cutting through the steel door took 4 hours. The sound of industrial saws screamed through sublevel C, echoing up into the hidden corners of the prison like a warning siren. Guards were doubled across every nearby block. Movement was restricted. Radio stayed quiet. No one wanted rumors spreading through the inmate population. When the final section of steel fell inward with a thunderous clang, a wave of cold air rolled out of the darkness beyond. Not stale, not trapped, circulating. Someone had kept this place alive. Flashlights pierced the black. A narrow corridor stretched forward, its concrete walls smoother than those above. Small recessed lights lined the ceiling, dark but intact. Electrical wiring ran along the sides, modern, maintained. This wasn't abandoned construction. It was a hidden extension. Kessler stepped inside first. Her footsteps echoed differently here. Deeper, hollow. 20 feet down the corridor, the first camera appeared. Mounted high in the corner. Lens clean. Power light off. But the wiring feeding into the wall was new. Not decades old. Not forgotten. Used. Someone's been maintaining this, she murmured. They advanced slowly, weapons low but ready. Every 10 feet, another camera. Every camera aimed down the corridor toward the entrance they'd just breached. Watching. Waiting. At the corridor's end stood a reinforced door with a narrow vertical window of thick security glass. Beyond it lay a small observation room overlooking something larger. Kessler wiped dust from the glass and looked through. Rows of cells, identical to the main facility's solitary units, but empty and used, untouched by time. Each cell contained a bed, a desk, a sink, and a toilet. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, casting sterile white across bare concrete. It looked ready for occupants. Occupants who had never arrived, or occupants who had already been Jesus, moved. One of the agents whispered. Kessler counted the cells. 12. A complete, hidden block. No records. No names. No history. She reached for the door handle. Locked. Electronic. And unlike the sealed steel door behind them, this one was still connected to the prison's power grid. Kessler turned to Grady. Open it. The warden stared through the glass, shaken. I can't. Why not? Because this system isn't on my network. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Not on his network, meaning someone else controlled it. Kessler stepped back, mind racing. If this block wasn't connected to the prison's central control system, then whoever built it had created an entirely separate command structure. Separate power routing, separate surveillance, separate locks. A prison within a prison, invisible to everyone except the people who knew where to look. And Mercer had found it. A sudden metallic clatter echoed down the corridor behind them. Every agent spun, weapons raised. Silence followed. Then a soft mechanical hum began vibrating through the floor. Kessler felt it through her boots. Something had powered on. The recessed ceiling lights flickered once, twice, then burst to life in a cold white chain reaction stretching back down the corridor towards sublevel C. The hidden wing was waking up. At the far end of the cell block, a single light turned on inside one of the empty cells. Then another, until all 12 cells were illuminated. Not randomly, sequentially, as if something were running a system check. Grady stepped back, horror dawning across his face. That's not possible. Kessler's phone vibrated in her pocket. Unknown number. She answered without hesitation. The same voice from before spoke, calm and measured. You weren't supposed to open it. Kessler gripped the phone tighter. Who is this? A pause. Then, softly, almost regretfully, he tried to tell you. The line went dead. At that exact moment, the reinforced door in front of them unlocked with a heavy, final click. No one had touched a control panel. No one had entered a code. The hidden block had opened itself. Kessler pushed the door slowly. It swung inward without resistance. The air inside the cell block felt colder than the corridor. Cleaner. Conditioned. A place prepared for long-term use, not storage. She stepped into the central walkway. 12 doors faced her, each with a narrow viewing slit. Each closed, except one. Cell 7 stood open. Inside, the bed was unmade. The desk chair was pulled back. And on the concrete floor, beneath the dim fluorescent light, lay a bureau of prison's radio. Smeared with dried blood, Mercer's name was engraved into the casing. Kessler moved closer, pulse hammering in her ears. On the wall above the desk, scratched into the paint with something sharp, were 5 more words. Not written in dust this time. Carved deep. Permanent. He found the second routine. Behind her, the corridor lights flickered once more. And every cell door in the hidden block slammed shut at the same time, the sound echoing like a gunshot through concrete. The slam of the doors rolled through the hidden block like thunder trapped in concrete. For a split second, no one moved. Then every radio erupted at once. Control, do you copy? Main grid just spiked. We lost visual on your team. Static swallowed the replies. Agent Lena Kessler spun toward the exit, but the reinforced door they had entered through was already sealing itself. The motorized lock engaged with a grinding finality that echoed straight through her bones. They were locked inside, not trapped, contained. The lights overhead dimmed slightly, then stabilized. Somewhere deep in the walls, a low mechanical rhythm began pulsing, steady and deliberate, like a heartbeat built into the structure itself. Warden Grady pounded his fist against the sealed door. This wing is not connected to central control. Something else is driving the system. Kessler turned back to Cell 7. Mercer's radio lay where it had fallen, frozen in the moment he lost it. A faint smear of dried blood streaked toward the doorway, then stopped. No drag marks. No signs of a body being moved. He hadn't been taken out. He'd walked out, or he'd been led. Kessler stepped inside the cell, scanning every surface. The room was identical to the others, except for one detail. The desk was bolted to the floor slightly off-center. Not enough for the casual eye to notice, but enough to make the room feels subtly wrong. She crouched and ran her fingers along the concrete beneath it. Hollow, not solid like the rest of the floor. "Get me a light," she said quietly. An agent knelt beside her, angling his flashlight beneath the desk. A hairline seemed traced a rectangle in the concrete. A panel. Kessler slid her fingers into the crack and pulled. The slab lifted with surprising ease. Beneath it, a narrow shaft dropped into darkness. A ladder descended along one wall, disappearing into black. A prison beneath the hidden prison. Grady's voice trembled. "That's not on any architectural record." Kessler looked at him without blinking. "It is now." She swung her legs over the edge and began to climb down. The air grew colder with every rung. The sounds of the cell block faded above her, replaced by a faint electrical hum and the distant whisper of ventilation. At the bottom, her boots touched metal grating instead of concrete. She stepped off the ladder into a passageway that didn't look like part of a prison at all. The walls were paneled, not poured. Wiring ran in neat bundles behind transparent shielding. Small indicator lights blinked steadily along a row of server racks embedded into the wall. This was infrastructure, a control spine. The others descended behind her, their flashlight beams sweeping across equipment that shouldn't exist under any correctional facility. At the far end of the passage stood a reinforced glass enclosure. Inside, a single workstation faced a wall of monitors. Most were dark. One was alive. A camera feed, not from the hidden block, from somewhere else. Kessler stepped closer. The image showed a corridor she recognized instantly. The main solitary wing of ADX. But the angle was wrong. Too low. Too far back. Watching from a place cameras weren't supposed to be. She scanned the workstation. A keyboard. A biometric pad. A simple, brutal interface on the screen. 12 rectangles labeled only with numbers. 7 was highlighted. Active. Beneath it, a status line pulsed in stark white letters. Routine shifted. A faint sound came from above. Not footsteps. Not voices. Doors. Opening. Across the main prison. Kessler's radio crackled back to life. "Agent Kessler, report. Cells are unlocking and relocking across multiple blocks. No pattern. It's like the system is reshuffling. Reshuffling. Breaking routine." Kessler's eyes returned to the screen. This system wasn't just a hidden wing. It was a parallel control architecture capable of altering the prison's operational patterns independently of central command. A second routine. Invisible. Unpredictable. Weaponized. She reached for the keyboard. The moment her fingers touched it, the monitor changed. Text scrolled across the screen, not typed but triggered. "Welcome to the redundancy," Grady whispered behind her. "This was never meant to house inmates." Kessler read the next line aloud. It was meant to house the system. A memory surfaced from Mercer's logs. His reassignment. Maintenance escort duty. Sublevel C. He hadn't stumbled onto this. He'd been brought near it, and he'd realized what it was. A contingency layer built to assume control if the primary system was ever compromised. Not for riots. Not for escapes. For something more precise. For removing predictability from the most controlled place on Earth. The screen shifted again. A single camera feed filled the display. A man sat at the workstation's twin somewhere else in the facility. He looked directly into the camera. Directly at them. Not masked. Not hidden. Calm. Middle-aged. Graying hair. Bureau uniform. Kessler felt the air leave her lungs. "Daniel Mercer," she breathed. "Alive." Mercer leaned closer to his camera, his eyes carrying a tired clarity. "I didn't disappear," he said softly. "I stepped out of the first design." The audio cut, but his lips kept moving. The system muted him. The image froze, then vanished. Every monitor went dark. Above them, the deep mechanical rhythm stopped. Silence fell so completely it felt manufactured. Then Kessler's radio screamed again. "All units, lockdown override initiated. We've lost primary control. Someone is rewriting movement patterns from an unknown node." Kessler stared at the empty screen. Mercer wasn't dead. He wasn't missing. He was inside the second routine, and he was using it, not to escape, to change the prison itself. Grady backed away from the workstation, his voice hollow. If he controls that layer, he can alter every schedule, every patrol, every automated movement inside ADX without ever touching the main grid. Kessler nodded slowly. He can make the entire facility unpredictable. A pause. Then the truth settled over them like falling concrete. He can make it vulnerable. A distant alarm began to wail above them. Not the riot alarm. not the escape siren, a tone none of the guards recognized, because it had never sounded before. Kessler turned back to the keyboard and typed the only name that mattered. Mercer. The biometric pad flashed red. Access denied. She tried again. Denied. Then the screen flickered. One final line appeared. He didn't steal the key. He became it. The shaft ladder rattled above them. Footsteps descended. Slow. Measured. A shadow stretched across the metal grating. Mercer stepped into the light. Alive, breathing, uniform stained, eyes steady. No weapon in his hands. Only exhaustion. Kessler raised her gun anyway. Daniel Mercer, she said. Step away from the controls. He shook his head gently. You don't understand what this place really is, he replied. It was never just a prison. It was an experiment in removing pattern from human behavior. Grady stared at him in disbelief. You broke into a classified failsafe system. Mercer met his gaze. No, I followed the design. Kessler didn't lower her weapon. Why? Mercer looked up toward the ceiling, toward the miles of concrete and steel above them. Because the first routine didn't just control inmates, he said quietly. It controlled the people who worked here. Every guard moved like clockwork. Every response predictable. If someone ever learned that rhythm, they could own this place. His eyes returned to hers. So they built a second rhythm. One that couldn't be memorized. One that could change everything in an instant. Kessler's voice hardened. You activated it. I completed it, Mercer corrected. Sirens rose to a deafening pitch overhead. Somewhere above, doors slammed. Somewhere else, doors opened. The prison was no longer operating on any schedule anyone understood. Kessler stepped closer. You're going to shut it down. Mercer's expression softened, almost regretful. I can't. Why not? Because the moment I leave this system, it stops being unpredictable. The meaning hit her like a physical blow. The second routine didn't run on code. It ran on him. His decisions. His movements. His presence. He was the randomness. The redundancy. The human variable no algorithm could predict. Mercer took a slow breath. They built this place to break routine, he said. But routine was the only thing keeping it stable. Kessler's finger tightened on the trigger. Then this ends now. Mercer nodded. Yes, he said softly. It does. He stepped backward into the shadows beyond the server racks. The lights flickered. The screens died. The hum faded. And every door in ADX Florence locked at once. Perfect. Silent. Absolute. By the time backup power restored the primary control system, the hidden corridor was empty. The workstation was dark. The shaft beneath cell 7 sealed itself from below. Daniel Mercer was gone. No body was ever found. No exit was ever recorded. Official reports called it a systems malfunction triggered by unauthorized access to decommissioned infrastructure. The hidden wing was filled with concrete. Sublevel C was erased from internal maps. And the design that had been built twice was buried beneath tons of poured stone. But some nights, long after lights out, guards still reported something they couldn't explain. Doors locking half a second too late. Cameras shifting angles on their own. Footsteps echoing where no patrol was scheduled. As if somewhere beneath the prison, a second routine was still running. Waiting. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.